In a quiet neighborhood in Charleston, South Carolina, where the streets are lined with oak trees draped in Spanish moss, and the gentle hum of life feels like a timeless melody. In one of those houses, a love story unfolded that would challenge what it means to truly care for someone. Jack and Emily were just like any other couple, deeply in love, filled with hopes, dreams, and the simple joys of life. They had the kind of bond that made their friends say, they're perfect for each other. But life, as it often does, had other plans. What would you do if the person you love most began to change in ways neither of you could control? How far would you go to protect their happiness, even at the cost of your own? This isn't just a story of love. It's about the choices we make when love is put to the test. It's about one man's decision to carry a secret so profound, it changed the way he saw the world. Stay with me, because by the end, you'll see why this husband's sacrifice wasn't just an act of love. It was a lesson for us all. Jack and Emily's story began on an ordinary spring day, though neither of them could have imagined how extraordinary their connection would become. Jack was a school teacher at a small community elementary school in Charleston, South Carolina. He wasn't flashy or wealthy, but his kindness and patience were what made him beloved by his students and respected by their parents. Emily was a nurse at the local hospital, known for the way she could calm even the most anxious patients with just a smile. They met at a neighborhood charity event, a fundraiser for children in need, where Emily was volunteering and Jack had brought his students to perform a play. They clicked almost instantly, drawn to each other by something deeper than appearances. Jack admired Emily's bright laughter, her humility, and the way she listened to everyone as if they were the most important person in the room. Emily, in turn, was touched by Jack's gentle humor and the genuine care he showed toward others. It wasn't long before they were inseparable. Their wedding day was nothing short of magical. It was held under the sprawling oak trees of Middleton Place, one of Charleston's most historic and beautiful venues. The sun shone through the Spanish moss hanging from the branches, casting a golden glow over the gathering of friends and family who had come to celebrate. Emily, in her simple yet elegant gown, looked radiant as she walked down the aisle, her eyes meeting Jack's with a look of pure love. Jack, in his humble suit, couldn't hold back his tears as he promised to love and cherish her for the rest of his life. But their love wasn't just about grand gestures or picturesque moments. It was in the quiet, everyday things they shared. Emily always packed Jack's lunch, slipping a handwritten note into the bag, sometimes a joke, sometimes a simple "I'm proud of you." Jack, on the other hand, would stop by the hospital after work just to bring her favorite coffee and spend a few minutes chatting about her day. On weekends, they'd stroll along the shores of Folly Beach, collecting shells and talking about their dreams. They leaned on each other during life's little struggles. Emily would encourage Jack when he felt overwhelmed by his teaching workload, reminding him of the impact he was making on his students. And Jack stood by Emily's side during her long night shifts, waiting up for her no matter how late, just so she wouldn't come home to an empty house. It was the kind of love that felt unshakable, a bond rooted not in appearances or fleeting passion, but in the deepest understanding of who they were as individuals. Together, they seemed ready to face anything life could throw at them. But life, as they were about to learn, often has its own plans. Little did they know, the tests of their love were only beginning. It started with a small, almost unnoticeable patch on Emily's forearm. She thought little of it at first, a faint, discolored spot that seemed harmless. But as days turned into weeks, the patch began to grow, spreading slowly but unmistakably across her skin. What initially seemed like a minor irritation was becoming something she couldn't ignore. Emily hesitated to tell Jack. She tried to cover it with long sleeves and scarves, brushing off his casual questions about why she always seemed cold, even in the warmth of Charleston summer. But one evening, as she reached for a glass on the top shelf, Jack noticed. Her sleeve slid back, revealing a streak of mottled skin that she had desperately been hiding. His eyes softened as he asked gently, what's this?" She froze, unable to find the words, and simply pulled her sleeve back down, muttering, "It's nothing." But Jack knew it wasn't nothing. Eventually, Emily saw a doctor, and the diagnosis came. A chronic skin condition that wasn't life-threatening, but would permanently change her appearance. Words like incurable and progressive echoed in her mind as she sat in the sterile exam room, her hands trembling as she clutched the pamphlets the dermatologist handed her. She felt a wave of emotions, confusion, fear, and most of all, shame. Over the months, the changes in her skin became more pronounced. The once small patch had spread across her arms, her neck, and even her face. Emily found herself avoiding mirrors, dreading her reflection. Her once radiant confidence dimmed as she withdrew from the world around her. She couldn't help but wonder if Jack would still see her the same way. "What if he doesn't love me anymore?" She whispered to herself late at night, tears streaming down her face. But Jack's response was nothing short of remarkable. He saw the way Emily avoided his gaze, the way she flinched when he reached to hold her hand. One evening, as she sat silently at the dinner table, he reached out and placed his hand gently over hers. He said, his voice steady and full of love, "You're beautiful. You've always been beautiful to me. This doesn't change that." He didn't stop there. Every day, Jack found ways to remind Emily of her worth. He left little notes around the house, on the bathroom mirror, on her bedside table, even in her purse, each one saying things like, "You're more than enough," or "Your heart is what makes you shine." He planned quiet, intimate dates where they would sit by the beach under the stars, just talking. And when she tried to pull away, embarrassed by her appearance, he would gently turn her face toward him and say, "I see you, Emily, the real you, and I love every part of who you are." Still, Emily struggled to believe him. The world outside wasn't as kind as Jack was. Strangers stared and her own inner voice grew louder, telling her she wasn't enough. She began to wonder if his love was out of pity, even though deep down she knew Jack better than that. The tension grew as she wrestled with her insecurities, battling the question that had taken root in her heart. How can he love me when I can't even love myself? It was a storm they would face together. But for Emily, the journey to truly believe in Jack's love and her own worth was only beginning. Jack had always been the steady force in Emily's life. So when he told her he was heading to Atlanta for a teachers' conference, she smiled and encouraged him to go, even though she would miss him terribly. "You'll do great," she said as she straightened his tie, her voice full of quiet pride. He kissed her forehead before heading out the door, promising to call every night. The days felt longer without Jack at home. Emily busied herself with work and chores, counting down the hours until his return. On the evening he was scheduled to drive back. She prepared his favorite dinner, roast chicken with mashed potatoes and a hint of rosemary. But as the clock ticked past his expected arrival time, a sense of unease crept in. Her phone rang, and she answered it quickly, expecting to hear Jack's warm voice. Instead, it was a voice she didn't recognize. Calm, professional, yet heavy with the kind of news no one wants to deliver. Jack had been in an accident on the interstate. He was alive but injured, and he was being rushed to the nearest hospital. Emily's hands shook as she grabbed her keys and headed to the hospital, her mind racing with questions. Was he okay? How bad was it? When she finally arrived, a nurse led her to his room. Jack lay there, his head wrapped in bandages, his eyes closed. The doctor explained that the accident had caused severe trauma to his optic nerves. They would need time to determine the full extent of the damage, but the initial prognosis wasn't hopeful. Jack might never regain his sight. Emily sat by his bedside holding his hand, her heart breaking for the man who had always been her rock. When Jack finally woke, he reached out instinctively, and Emily was there, guiding his hand to hers. "I'm here, Jack," she said softly, her voice steady, despite the tears streaming down her face. "I'm not going anywhere." In the days that followed, their lives changed drastically. Jack, once fiercely independent, now had to rely on Emily for almost everything. And Emily, despite her own insecurities, rose to the challenge. She helped him navigate their home, prepared meals, and read to him in the evenings, her voice becoming his connection to the stories he loved so much. She found strength she didn't know she had, determined to be the support Jack needed. In a strange way, Emily felt a small sense of relief that Jack couldn't see her anymore. She no longer worried about hiding her skin condition or avoiding his gaze. For the first time in months, she didn't feel the weight of her own self-consciousness. But deep down, a part of her wondered if she was using his blindness as a shield, a way to avoid confronting her own feelings about her appearance. Through it all, Jack remained the same in one important way. His love for Emily never wavered. He would often tell her, "I don't need to see you to know how beautiful you are. I feel it every time you're near." His words cut through her doubts, but the battle within her wasn't over. The journey ahead would test both of them in ways they could never have imagined. But one thing was certain: their love would be the light guiding them through the darkness. The years that followed were a testament to the depth of their love. Emily and Jack adapted to a new rhythm of life, one defined by quiet moments and unspoken understanding. Despite Emily's declining health, she found joy in their evenings together. Jack would sit by her side, his hands resting gently on hers, as they reminisced about the life they had built. Emily's skin condition had worsened over time, but Jack's blindness had become a strange sort of comfort to her. She no longer felt the pressure to hide her appearance. In Jack's eyes, figuratively, at least, she was the same Emily he had fallen in love with all those years ago. He would often say, "I don't need to see you. I can feel your beauty in the way you love me." But her health struggles grew heavier with each passing year. The once strong woman who had stepped up to care for Jack now needed his help with even the simplest tasks. Emily's energy waned, and there were days when even speaking seemed to exhaust her. Jack, though, never faltered. He had learned to navigate their home with precision, ensuring Emily had everything she needed. His love became her lifeline. One evening, as they sat on the porch listening to the sounds of the neighborhood, Emily leaned her head against Jack's shoulder. "Do you remember?" she began, her voice soft. "Our first dance at the teacher's gala." Jack chuckled, the sound warm and familiar. "Of course I do. You wore that blue dress, and I was so nervous I stepped on your toes." Emily smiled. "You apologized so many times, but I didn't care. I was just happy to be in your arms." These tender moments became more precious as Emily's condition worsened. Her body grew frail, and the pain became harder to manage. Yet through it all, she found peace in Jack's presence. His unwavering love was a reminder that she was more than her illness, more than her appearance. She was Emily, the woman he adored. One morning, Jack woke to find Emily unusually quiet. He reached out to touch her hand, but it was cold. A wave of realization washed over him as he called her name, his voice trembling. Emily had passed peacefully in her sleep, her face serene as if she had been dreaming of happier times. The loss was a weight Jack could hardly bear. For days, the house felt unbearably empty. The absence of Emily's laughter, her touch, her presence, it was a void that nothing could fill. Jack mourned deeply, but even in his grief, he found solace in the memories they had shared. He sat by her favorite chair one evening, holding the last letter she had written him. In it, she thanked him for loving her so completely, for seeing her when she couldn't see herself. "Jack," the letter read, "you've been my strength, my heart, and my home. I hope you find comfort in knowing that I felt truly loved." Jack folded the letter carefully, his hands trembling. Though his world had changed forever, Emily's love remained, an unbreakable bond that would guide him through the days ahead. After Emily's passing, Jack's home became quieter than ever. The laughter, the soft hums of her favorite songs, and even the comforting shuffle of her footsteps were now memories etched deeply into the walls of their house. Jack carried on as best as he could, leaning on the routines they had built together, but the ache of her absence was undeniable. One afternoon, their longtime neighbor, Mrs. Wilson, stopped by with a casserole in hand. She had always admired the love between Jack and Emily, but today her face was etched with concern. "Jack," she began hesitantly, "I've been thinking about you. I don't know how you're managing all this, especially with your condition. You know you can count on us for help, don't you? Jack paused for a moment, his hands resting on the table. A faint smile crossed his lips, and then, to Mrs. Wilson's surprise, a tear rolled down his cheek. "Mrs. Wilson," Jack said, his voice steady but filled with emotion, "I've been meaning to tell someone this, and I suppose now is the time." He took a deep breath before continuing. "I'm not blind. I never was." The room fell silent, the air thick with the weight of his words. Mrs. Wilson's eyes widened in disbelief. "What do you mean, Jack?" All this time, Jack nodded slowly, his gaze distant, as if he were replaying years of memories in his mind. When Emily's skin condition began to worsen, I saw how it affected her. She became so self-conscious, so afraid of being judged, even by me. I couldn't stand to see her suffer like that. So I made a decision. I pretended to lose my sight. Mrs. Wilson gasped, her hand covering her mouth. Jack's voice trembled as he continued. "I wanted her to feel safe. I wanted her to know that my love for her had nothing to do with her appearance. I saw the pain she carried, and I knew that if she believed I couldn't see her changes, she might find some peace." Tears welled up in his eyes as he spoke. It wasn't always easy, pretending like I couldn't see. But every time she smiled, every time she let her guard down, I knew it was worth it. I loved her, Mrs. Wilson, not for how she looked, but for who she was. Emily was beautiful to me in ways that went far beyond what the world could see. As Jack spoke, memories flooded back to him. He remembered the nights he watched Emily brush her hair, her movements slower as the years went on. He thought of the quiet moments when she would sit by the window, lost in thought, and how he'd silently admired her resilience. He saw her struggles, her fears, her strength, and he loved her more with each passing day. Mrs. Wilson sat back, tears streaming down her face. "Jack, I don't even know what to say. That's the most selfless thing I've ever heard." Jack gave a small, bittersweet laugh. It wasn't selfless, really. Loving Emily was the easiest thing I've ever done. Pretending to be blind was just a way to shield her from the world's harshness, even if only a little. The conversation left Mrs. Wilson speechless, but it also left her deeply moved. Jack's revelation wasn't just about his love for Emily. It was a lesson in compassion, understanding, and the lengths we go to for the people we cherish. As Jack sat alone that evening, he reflected on the life they had shared. His love for Emily had always been unconditional, and even now, he felt her presence in every corner of their home. He hoped that in her final years, she had truly felt the depth of his devotion. It was a secret he had carried for years, a quiet act of love that spoke louder than words ever could. And now, as the world around him seemed to pause, Jack found comfort in knowing that Emily's spirit would forever be a part of him. Jack's story is not just about love. It's about the choices we make to protect and uplift those we care about. His quiet act of sacrifice reminds us that true love isn't about grand gestures or perfection. It's about seeing the essence of a person, embracing their flaws, and standing by them when they feel most vulnerable. Jack chose to let go of his own comfort to ensure Emily could live without the burden of judgment. He didn't need recognition or applause for what he did. His love spoke through his actions, proving that the most powerful bonds are built on acceptance, empathy, and selflessness. In a world that often prioritizes appearances and outward success, Jack's story is a reminder to look deeper, to see beyond the surface and focus on the qualities that truly matter: kindness, resilience, and the beauty of a loving heart. We all have a choice in how we show up for the people in our lives. Are we willing to stand by them when they feel unseen? Are we willing to sacrifice a bit of ourselves to give them peace? Jack's story challenges us to think about these questions and inspires us to act with compassion and integrity. If this story touched your heart, take a moment to reflect on the relationships in your own life. Are you seeing the people you love for who they truly are? Are you creating a space where they feel safe to be themselves? Thank you for joining us on this journey of love, sacrifice, and humanity. If you were moved by Jack and Emily's story, don't forget to like this video, share it with someone who might need this reminder, and subscribe for more heartfelt stories that show us what matters most in life. Because at the end of the day, it's not about what we look like, what we have, or what we achieve. It's about how we love and how we make others feel. And that perhaps is the greatest legacy of all.